My name is Jane. I believed I had met Mike, the love of my life, when I was just 28 years old. In less than a year after our first meeting, we were married. Mike is a tall accountant who has a laugh that brightens any space. I've always been more of a planner. I work in digital marketing, and I enjoy painting on the weekends. I believed that we balanced each other out. The day after our wedding, our living room was overflowing with mail and wrapped gifts. The ruins of our celebration had a wild beauty to them all. At that point, Carol and Dave, Mike's parents, stopped by. We got married so fast that I hadn't really had a chance to get to know them, but they appeared fine, even typical. Carol and Dave showed more than a passing interest in the gifts. As we began to open them, I noted, "Is that a crystal vase?" Carol inquired as she picked up a glittering item my aunt had given us. With bright eyes, she flipped it over in her palms. "Yes, my Aunt Linda gave it to me." "Isn't it pretty?" I remarked, attempting to divert her focus from asserting it. Carol had it in a different pile off to the side before I realized it. She remarked casually, "I think we can find a good place for this at our house." Mike was too busy untangling a set of expensive kitchen appliances from his cousin to notice. I glanced at him in the hopes that he would speak. When Mike finally replied, "Mom, that's our wedding gift," he smiled casually, as though the whole thing were a joke. "Come on, this will just be dust." Dave said, putting an arm over Carol, "We'll use it. Besides, you two are young. You'll get plenty more gifts over the years." It felt strange, but I attempted to laugh it off with them. I tried to reclaim it without making a disturbance, saying, "Actually, I was thinking it would look great in our foyer." Carol's expression was a mixture of astonishment and displeasure as she stared at me. "You must learn to share, Jane." She said, "We're family now, and families help each other out," in a strong voice that seemed to be trying to teach me something. Mike immediately sensed the tension and jumped in. "For now, let's not worry about this. Jane, you do realize that we have a ton of gifts." I bit back my words as I nodded. However, as they proceeded to sort through the presents, reserving a few special items for themselves, I began to feel uneasy. Seeing strangers take possession of aspects of my life was like that. Mike, on the other hand, simply allowed them. Our first year together went too quickly, and before I knew it, it was time for our anniversary. I reserved a table at Chez Louis, a quaint small restaurant that we both adored, since I wanted to make it unique and a celebration of us. To let Mike's parents know how much we value them, I thought it would be lovely to have them join us. Carol and Dave had already arrived at the restaurant with their menus when we sat down. Carol remarked, "This place is fancy," as she studied the chandeliers. Mike gave me a subtle thank you for setting everything up by squeezing my hand beneath the table. The waiter came by, and we started to order. I went for the salmon, Mike's favorite, and I noticed Carol's eyes darting down the menu to the most expensive items. "We'll have the lobster and the filet mignon," she declared, pointing at the priciest things without a second glance. Dave nodded in agreement. "And why not throw in a bottle of your best wine?" he added, winking at the waiter. I could feel my smile stiffening. Quite the celebration, huh? I tried to keep my voice light. Mike shrugged. "It's a special night," he said. "Let's not think about the cost tonight." The conversation was light for the most part, but I couldn't help but notice how Carol and Dave savored the food like it was their last meal, almost oblivious to the price tag I knew would come at the end. As we ate, I couldn't shake the feeling of being taken advantage of. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was the principle. It was our anniversary, and it felt like it was being hijacked. When the check arrived, I saw Mike's eyes widen a little, but he quickly recovered and handed his card to the waiter. On our way out, Carol looped her arm through mine. Jane, this was just lovely. We should do it again next year, she said, a satisfied smile on her face. Thanksgiving was around the corner, and with it came the start of the holiday season. Mike and I had started to decorate the house, a mix of fall colors and early Christmas cheer. It was cozy, the kind of place you'd want to come back to after a long day. One evening, as we were stringing up some lights around the living room windows, Mike's phone pinged with a message. He read it and laughed. Oh, my parents are ahead of the game. They've already sent their Christmas wish list. I was untangling another set of lights and looked up. Wish list? I asked. Yeah, they send one every year. Helps with shopping, he explained, his fingers scrolling through his phone. Curiosity got the better of me. So what's on this famous list? Mike hesitated, then handed me his phone. The list was extensive. Top-tier electronics, designer clothes, luxury items they probably didn't even need. I scrolled through in disbelief. They can't be serious, I said. This is a lot. Mike took his phone back and shrugged. They like the good stuff. What can I say? I didn't know how to respond. There was a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. Mike's birthday was also coming up, and I'd been so excited to give him the watch he'd been eyeing for months now. It felt like any gift would be less about us and more about fulfilling a list. When it came to us making our list, I couldn't help but feel petty, making one at all. Maybe we should just ask for charitable donations in our name, I suggested half-heartedly. Mike laughed. Good one. But seriously, what do you want? You need a new laptop, right? The holidays rolled around, and I got Carol and Dave a nice coffee maker. Nothing too fancy, but practical. They, in turn, gave me a set of scented candles. They were nice, but the difference was stark. I didn't say anything. Mike seemed happy with the fancy drone they got him, though the unspoken rule was clear. We were expected to give big and receive small. It didn't feel right, but bringing it up only seemed to cause tension. So I kept quiet, wrapping gifts, and pasting on a smile for the holidays. But inside, I was beginning to count the costs, not just in dollars, but in the emotional toll this was starting to take. I was at my desk, staring at the computer screen when the email notification popped up. It was my quarterly bonus, bigger than I had expected. My first thought was to do something meaningful with it, something for Mike and me. So I booked us a trip to Paris. We had talked about going since we met, and it felt like the perfect time to make that dream happen. That night, over dinner, I told Mike about the surprise. His face lit up like I'd never seen before. Paris, really, babe? That's amazing, he exclaimed, getting up to kiss me. I was basking in the joy of the moment when his phone rang. It was his mom. I could tell by the way his face changed. Yeah, she booked us a trip to Paris, he said into the phone, and I knew I should have asked him not to say anything just yet. Mike's enthusiasm dwindled as he listened more and more. I know. You've always wanted to go, he trailed off, looking at me with a pained expression. I felt my heart sink. He hung up, and there was a heavy silence. They want to come with us, he said finally, almost like he was asking for permission. I sat there, my fork halfway to my mouth, paused in midair. To Paris with us? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, they said they've never been and always wanted to go, Mike explained, running a hand through his hair. I think we should take them. The room felt suddenly too small. It's supposed to be for us, Mike. Our trip, I said, feeling a tightness in my chest. He didn't respond at first. I know, but they're getting older, and I feel bad. They've done so much for me. I thought about all the one-sided gift exchanges, the anniversary dinner, and every other little thing that had piled up over the past year. But this is our time, I insisted, my voice firm. We can plan a trip with them another time. This bonus, it's for us. Mike sighed, a deep, frustrated sound. They won't understand that. You know how they are. And you know how hard I've worked for this. He said. I said the words like stones in my mouth. I want us to enjoy it together, just us, like we planned. Mike didn't say anything for a while, then said, okay, we'll tell them some other time. Might work better. But when the time came to tell them, Mike's words faltered. Look, maybe we can all go together next year, he offered. But Carol was having none of it. Why next year? We can afford it now, she retorted over the speakerphone, her voice laced with disappointment. I couldn't take it anymore. Because this trip is for us, Carol, Mike, and I. We need this time together, I said, unable to hide my frustration. There was a pause, then Carol said, well, that's very selfish of you, Jane. Very selfish indeed. After the call, the air between Mike and me was tense. He was torn, I could tell, but this was one thing I wasn't willing to budge on. Paris was meant to be a dream trip for us, and I wasn't going to let that dream be taken away. Mike became a shadow in his own home, leaving early for work and coming back late. Our conversations dwindled to monosyllables. Dinner's in the oven, I'd say when I heard the garage door open, my voice echoing off the empty walls. Thanks, he'd reply, a hollow word that hung in the air between us. I missed him, missed us. I yearned for the easy days when we dreamed together on the couch, our plans and laughs intertwined. I longed to reach out to him, to break through the invisible barrier that had erected itself after the argument over Paris. But every attempt felt like speaking through a thick glass wall. I could see him, but I couldn't reach him. One particularly hard evening, I sat at the dinner table across from Mike, the sound of his fork against the plate drilling into the silence. I cleared my throat. Mike, this can't go on, I started, my voice barely above a whisper, fearful of shattering the fragile peace. We need to talk about what happened. We can't let this silence be the new normal for us. Mike continued to eat, his expression unreadable. Then he set down his fork, a sign that I had his attention, even if just for a moment. What do you want me to say, Jane? He asked, a hint of weariness seeping through. I want to understand why you're taking this so hard, why it feels like you're choosing them over me. I replied, the hurt evident in my tone. He sighed, his hands folded in front of him. They're my parents, Jane. They've been hoping to go to Paris their whole lives. And what about what we've been hoping for, our plans, our dreams? My own frustrations started to bubble up, words becoming more pointed, desperate to bridge the gap between us. Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exasperation I'd come to recognize. I know, he said. For a moment, I saw the flicker of the man I married, conflicted and torn, but not indifferent. It's just they've always been there for me. I feel obligated, you know. But where does that leave us, Mike? I pressed, leaning forward, trying to catch his eye. What about our marriage? He didn't respond right away, and in that pause, I felt a wave of fear. Fear that maybe we weren't as solid as I had believed, that maybe the foundation we had built was less rock and more sand, easily eroded by the steady tide of his parents' needs and wants. It's supposed to be us against the world, Mike, not me against you and them, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside me. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the conflict warring within him. I know, Jane, I just don't know how to make everyone happy. That's just it, I said, a sudden clarity washing over me. We can't. We can't always make everyone happy. But we made vows to each other, Mike. Doesn't that count for something? He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the table before finding mine. It does. It counts for a lot. The rest of the meal passed in contemplative silence, a change from the strained quiet that had become our norm. It was as if my words had planted a seed, or perhaps watered one that had been lying dormant within Mike all this time. The morning sun poured in through the windows, but the warmth it usually brought seemed to have no place in our home today. I woke up to an eerie quiet, the other side of the bed untouched from the night before. The emptiness of the house felt like a heavy blanket, suffocating in its silence. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I reached for my phone, expecting the usual absence of messages given the silent treatment that had taken residence in our home. Instead, my screen was flooded with notifications, all from my bank. A lump formed in my throat as I read the details, multiple transactions, including airline tickets, and a pair of hotel bookings in Paris, all made while I was asleep. The timestamps on the emails told me the flight would have left hours ago. Mike and his parents were already on their way to Paris, using my hard-earned bonus to fund a trip I was meant to be on. Disbelief turned to anger, and then to a crushing sense of betrayal. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, as the reality settled in. Mike had access to my account. I trusted him implicitly, never imagining he would abuse that trust. Yet here it was, in stark black and white, a digital paper trail of deceit. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The one person I had believed would stand by me had chosen his own comfort over our relationship. I thought back to all the times I'd brushed aside the little signs, the excuses I'd made for him, for us. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number, knowing full well he wouldn't answer, not with the time difference, not with my previous ultimatum ringing in his ears. "Mike," I began, the beep of the voicemail almost mocking in its cheerfulness. "I saw the charges. You took your parents to Paris with my bonus. I don't even know what to say, but I hope it's worth it. I hope it's worth everything." The house felt even emptier after the call, the walls closing in on me with the weight of everything unsaid, and now perhaps never to be spoken. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos raging within me. They had left just like that, with no regard for me or the life we were supposed to be building together. I canceled the hotel rooms, the return flights, every piece of the trip that was connected to my finances. With each cancellation, I felt a piece of my old life fall away, the future I'd envisioned evaporating before my eyes. By the time I was done, there was nothing left to do but act. I contacted the bank and removed Mike's access to my accounts. A finality in each click that felt both terrifying and liberating. The man I had married, the family I had tried to be a part of, they were all just strangers now. Strangers who had used me, who had seen my generosity as something to exploit rather than cherish. I packed my bags with a robotic efficiency, each item a reminder of a dream I had to put away. There was no going back from this, no gentle words or apologies that could mend the rift that his betrayal had caused. Mike had chosen his path, and in doing so, he had set me on mine. The ring I'd once worn with pride lay cold and heavy in my palm. I set it down on the counter, its sparkle mocking in the morning light. With one last look at the life I was leaving behind, I closed the door on the house that was never truly a home. It was late afternoon when I finally left the house. My car was packed with clothes and essentials, a stark reminder of the sudden turn my life had taken. As I drove, the messages began to flood in, one from Mike, several from his mother. I pulled over to read them, knowing they'd only fuel the fire of my resolve. Mike's message read, "Jane, please, we need to talk about this. Can't we just discuss it?" His words seemed almost insulting in their simplicity. I started to type a response, then stopped. No words would bridge the chasm between us. His mother's messages were a mix of confusion and anger. "What's going on? Why have you canceled our rooms? Call me." I imagined her sitting in a cafe in Paris, expecting luxury and finding complication. I turned the phone off. They were in the middle of a trip funded by deceit. They could figure it out. My first stop was the bank. I needed to ensure my finances were completely secure. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman with a gentle face, greeted me. "I need to make sure all my accounts are locked down." "My husband, he won't have access anymore," I explained, my voice steady despite the emotion I felt. Of course, she nodded, offering a sympathetic smile. "Let me make sure you're protected." By the time I left the bank, my accounts were secure, and a new sense of determination settled within me. I drove to my sister's house, the only place I felt I could go. She opened the door before I could even knock. "Jane, I've been so worried," she said, pulling me into a hug. I allowed myself a moment to just be held, to let the reality of my situation be shared. "I can't believe he would do this to you," she said as we sat down at her kitchen table. "You deserve so much better." I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. "I do. And that's why I'm not going back. I've canceled everything. I've left the house. I'm done." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Good for you. What's your plan now?" I looked around the familiar room, feeling the first twinge of relief. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting with a divorce. I can't stay married to someone who has so little respect for me." Sarah's face was a mixture of anger and pride. "I'll support you however I can. Do you need a lawyer?" "I'll find one," I said, my voice growing firmer with each word. "I need someone who doesn't know Mike or his family. I need this cut clean." The conversation shifted as Sarah helped me unpack my car and make plans for the next few days. There was a strange comfort in the mundane tasks, a grounding in the midst of chaos. I was standing in the kitchen at my sister's house, a mug of coffee warming my hands when my phone vibrated with a persistence that felt all too familiar. It was Mike again. "Jane, we need to talk. I'm sorry, I miss you and I think we can work things out." His text read, a mixture of apology and plea. I sighed. The same rehearsed "I'm sorry" becoming a threadbare blanket that no longer provided comfort or warmth. "Not this time, Mike," I muttered under my breath, typing a response that left no room for ambiguity. "There's nothing left to discuss. Please respect my decision." I could almost hear the desperation in the silence that followed, but it wasn't enough to make me reconsider. Not anymore. When Mike's parents unexpectedly showed up at my sister's house a few days later, it put my determination to the test even more. Sarah waited wide-eyed at the door as they strode past her, their faces contorted with rage. His mother yelled, "You've got some nerve, Jane," in a high-pitched voice. "Our family vacation was destroyed by you. You're just a self-centered, avaricious woman." Sarah took a protective stance and moved between us. "That's sufficient. You won't enter my home and disparage my sister." I was certain that someone would call the police as the conflict got out of hand and the neighbors started to peep out of their windows. Sarah threatened to do just that if they didn't depart at the end. Long after they had left, the bad air they had left behind persisted. But in the middle of the confusion, I realized that I was really done. I did my part in the chilly legal ballet that was the divorce procedure, nodding along with explanations of settlements and splits and signing paperwork. But I sensed a tether unraveling, a chain cracking with every pen stroke. Then it was finished. As a free woman, I stood outside the courthouse. There was a light wind rustling my loose hair in the fresh air. Sarah gave me a strong hug and remained steadfast in her support. She said, "You did it, Jane," with delight in her tone. I had completed the task. I had resisted the manipulation that attempted to hold me back and the selfishness that attempted to seize me. Away from a past that no longer contained me, I turned my back on the courts. Mike's messages went on for some time, alternating between apologies, haggling, and finally rage. But as I continued living my life, many remained unread and drifted in the digital emptiness. Despite its small size, the unit I leased was well lit. I filled it with new memories, books, and plants. I returned to school and enrolled in courses that rekindled my long-neglected enthusiasm for learning. And I erased Mike's number from my phone one peaceful evening while enjoying a cup of tea on my tiny balcony. I had the freedom to develop, to heal, and most importantly, to be who I am without apology.
I've had enough, Nathan. I want a divorce. The words tumbled from my mouth, heavy with a mixture of fear and resolution. Nathan, my husband of 6 years, stared at me, his face a blend of disbelief and anger. "What are you talking about, Eliza? This is ridiculous," he exclaimed, his voice rising in frustration. I took a step back, feeling the weight of years of unspoken grievances pressing down on me. "This isn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. I've thought this through," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Nathan scoffed and crossed his arms. "You'll change your mind. You always do." But this time was different. I wouldn't change my mind. The endless cycle of neglect, his dismissive attitude towards my career as an interior designer, and the stifling loneliness that had crept into our marriage were suffocating me. It was time for a change. I had a business trip scheduled that day, a brief escape to another state for a project that demanded my expertise. Time was not on my side, and Nathan's unwillingness to have a constructive conversation only cemented my decision. I grabbed my suitcase, giving him one last look, a mix of sorrow and determination in my eyes. "I really mean it, Nathan. I'm done." His response was a cold, harsh laugh as he turned away, dismissing my words and me along with them. I left the house, the sound of the slamming door echoing my tumultuous emotions. The business trip was a blur. Meetings, presentations, and polite conversations with clients filled my days, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the scene with Nathan over and over. I felt a strange blend of liberation and fear. Was I ready for the unknown that lay ahead? Returning home the next day, the house was silent, almost reflective of the void in my heart. "I'm back," I called out, but there was no response. On the dining table lay a business card, a divorce lawyer's. Nathan had made his move, quicker than I had anticipated. I picked up the card, my fingers tracing the embossed letters. Nathan's quick decision surprised me, but in a way, it was a relief. Maybe he too realized that our marriage was beyond repair. Maybe this was for the best. Resolute, I dialed the number on the card. It was time to close this chapter of my life and begin anew. As I waited for the call to connect, a sense of empowerment washed over me. This was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a new one. My story, on my terms. As I sat in my home office, the echoes of my conversation with the divorce lawyer still lingered in my mind. The room, once a sanctuary where I sketched and imagined beautiful spaces, now felt like a capsule of my failed marriage. I let my gaze drift across the room, landing on the framed photos of Nathan and me. Our smiles in those pictures seemed to belong to strangers. It's hard to believe that just 6 years ago, Nathan and I were the quintessential happy couple. We met at a mutual friend's art exhibit. He was charming, with a quick wit that matched my own. Our shared love for art and design drew us together. We would spend hours discussing the latest trends in interior design, often debating over styles and aesthetics. When Nathan proposed, it felt like a fairy tale. We dreamt of building a life together, filled with love, shared ambitions, and eventually a family. However, reality painted a starkly different picture. Nathan's true colors began to show soon after our wedding. Initially, his comments were subtle, a jest about my job as an interior designer being just a hobby, or a passing remark about how a wife should prioritize home over career. But gradually his words grew sharper, his attitude more dismissive. The change in our relationship wasn't just emotional, but also practical. We had agreed to share household responsibilities, but soon All the tasks fell on my shoulders. Nathan would come home from his job at the architectural firm and immediately retreat to his study, leaving me to juggle my work deadlines and household chores alone. I tried to talk to him to remind him of the partnership we had promised each other. But each conversation ended in an argument, with Nathan declaring that housework wasn't his job. As I reflected on these moments, a sense of clarity began to dawn on me. I had been living in a facade, a marriage that looked perfect from the outside but was crumbling within. I wasn't just fighting for a divorce, I was fighting for my self-respect. It was then that I made a promise to myself. No longer would I be the Eliza who nodded and smiled, suppressing her own needs and desires. It was time to rebuild, not just my life, but also my identity. An identity not defined by Nathan or our failed marriage, but by my own strengths and passions. As I stood up from my desk, a newfound determination filled me. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it head-on. I was ready to rediscover the Eliza who dreamed of creating beauty in the world, one space at a time. The days following my decision to divorce Nathan were a whirlwind of emotions and legal consultations. But amidst this chaos, I discovered something that turned my world upside down. Nathan was having an affair. I stumbled upon this revelation one evening while working late on a project. My phone buzzed with a notification from a social media platform, a tag and a photo from a user I didn't recognize. Curiosity piqued. I opened the app, and there it was, a photo that felt like a punch to the gut. Nathan, arm in arm with a younger woman, smiling as if he hadn't a care in the world. The woman, Bella Harper, was an influencer known for her glamorous lifestyle posts. Anger and disbelief coursed through me as I scrolled through Bella's profile. There were more photos, subtle hints of their relationship hidden in plain sight. A picture at a restaurant with 2 wine glasses, a shot of a man's hand, Nathan's hand, I recognized, holding hers. Each post was a breadcrumb leading to the painful truth of Nathan's betrayal. The pain of the discovery was sharp, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. Nathan's late nights at the office, the weekends he was out with clients, they all made sense now. He wasn't just neglecting me, he had replaced me. I sat there, in the dim light of my office, feeling a mix of sadness and liberation. Sadness for the love I thought we had, and liberation from the lies I had been living. It was clear now, Nathan's affair wasn't just a fling. It was a deliberate choice, a choice that showed me where I stood in his life. But amidst the storm of emotions, a plan began to form in my mind. Nathan had underestimated me, thought me weak and compliant. He was wrong. I was an interior designer, a creator of spaces that told stories. And now it was time to rewrite my own story, one where I wasn't a victim but the architect of my own future. I spent the night poring over Bella's social media, gathering evidence. I needed to be prepared for the legal battles ahead. But more importantly, I needed closure. I needed to confront Nathan, not as the betrayed wife, but as a woman reclaiming her power. The next morning, I called my lawyer, my voice steady and resolute. "I have something that might interest you," I said, explaining my discovery. "It's time to set the record straight. It's time for Nathan to face the consequences of his actions." The revelation of Nathan's affair with Bella Harper changed everything. It was not just a betrayal. It was a mockery of the vows we had once taken so earnestly. The pain was deep, but it ignited a fire within me, a resolve to stand up for myself and reclaim my life. In the following weeks, I threw myself into my work with a renewed vigor, channeling my emotions into creativity. My designs were bolder, my concepts more daring. It was as if by freeing myself from Nathan's shadow, I had unleashed a part of me that was long suppressed. But the reality of my personal life couldn't be ignored. The divorce proceedings were underway, and with each meeting with my lawyer, I felt a step closer to freedom. I gathered all the evidence of Nathan's affair, preparing myself for the battles ahead. One evening, as I sat reviewing legal documents, Nathan walked in, his demeanor a strange mix of defiance and guilt. "So, you're really going through with this, huh?" he asked, his voice tinged with bitterness. "Yes, Nathan, I am," I replied calmly, without looking up from the papers. He let out a scoff. "You think you'll be better off without me? You think you can just throw away our marriage like it's nothing?" "Our marriage ended the moment you decided to be with someone else, Nathan. I said, finally looking at him. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm just picking up the pieces of what you broke. Nathan's face hardened. You'll regret this, Eliza. You're making a mistake. No, Nathan. The mistake was thinking you would change, but I'm correcting that mistake now. He didn't respond, just turned and left the room, his silence more telling than words. The day of the final hearing arrived quicker than I had anticipated. Standing before the judge, I felt an odd sense of peace. This was it, the moment of truth. Nathan and I presented our cases, the evidence of his affair leaving him with little to defend. The judge's gavel sounded like a bell of liberation when the divorce was finalized. I walked out of the courtroom, a free woman. But this was not just a legal victory. It was a personal triumph. I had stood up against the injustice and disrespect that had colored my marriage. As I stepped outside, the sun seemed brighter, the air fresher. I was no longer Eliza, Nathan's wife. I was Eliza Bennett, a woman who had reclaimed her life, her identity. But this was just the beginning. The next chapter of my life was waiting to be written, and I was ready to be its author. The finality of the divorce brought a sense of closure, but it also opened a new chapter of confrontations and revelations. It was time to face Nathan and his mistress, Bella Harper, in a way they never expected. I continued to live in the same house with Nathan until everything was settled. Our interactions were minimal, cold, and strictly necessary. He had already started to bring Bella around, flaunting his new relationship in a way that seemed designed to provoke me. But I refused to give him that satisfaction. I was planning, waiting for the right moment to make my move. One evening, as I sat in my studio surrounded by my designs, I heard them laughing in the living room. Something about their carefree joy struck a nerve. It was a stark reminder of the life Nathan had shattered. My hands clenched into fists, not out of anger, but determination. It was time to act. The following day, I contacted my lawyer and initiated the final phase of my plan. It's time to make them understand the consequences of their actions, I said with a resolve that surprised even me. The opportunity presented itself one weekend when Nathan announced that he was taking Bella on a trip. We'll be gone for the whole weekend, he said, a smug smile on his face. Enjoy your trip, I replied, my voice steady, giving nothing away. As soon as they left, I swung into action. I had already arranged for a moving company to come. Piece by piece, my belongings, everything I had brought into this house, everything that was mine, were carefully packed and removed. But I didn't stop there. I took everything that represented the life Nathan and I had built together, the furniture we had chosen, the art we had collected, the memories we had created. All of it, gone. When Nathan returned, he walked into an empty house. The shock on his face was palpable. "What have you done?" he stammered, looking around at the barren walls and empty spaces. "I did what I had to do," I said calmly. "I removed everything that was mine, everything that I contributed to this house." "This is insane, Eliza. You've taken everything." "Not everything, Nathan. Just what was rightfully mine. You wanted a new life with Bella, remember? I'm just helping you start from scratch." He looked around, defeated and bewildered. For the first time, I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes, but it was too late for regrets. As I turned to leave, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had taken back control of my life, piece by piece. Nathan and Bella were left to deal with the empty shell of a home, a fitting metaphor for the hollowness of their betrayal. The days following the great exodus of my possessions from the house were filled with a mix of liberation and reflection. I had taken a decisive step, one that was both empowering and symbolic. It was more than just reclaiming my belongings. It was about asserting my independence from a relationship that had long ceased to be a partnership. I had moved into a small, cozy apartment, a blank canvas that awaited my personal touch. It was in this new space, free from the shadows of the past, that I began to truly process everything that had happened. Meanwhile, Nathan and Bella faced the reality of their choices. The empty house was a constant reminder of the life that had been uprooted. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Nathan was struggling to come to terms with the changes. Bella, on the other hand, seemed more concerned with the loss of the material comforts than the relationship itself. It was during this time that I received an unexpected call. Nathan, his voice was a mix of anger and desperation. "Eliza, you've gone too far. You've taken everything. How could you?" I listened, a calmness enveloping me. "Nathan, I only took what belonged to me. You wanted a fresh start, remember? I'm just helping you with that. You've left us with nothing." His voice cracked, a sign of his fraying composure. "Nathan, you made your choices. Now you live with them. Bella wanted a life with you, and now she has it, just not the way she imagined." There was a pause, and for a moment I thought he had hung up. Then, quietly, he said, "I didn't think you'd actually do it. Sometimes, Nathan, we don't really know people until we see them in a new light." The call ended, leaving a profound silence in its wake. It was a conversation that marked the end of an era. I had spoken not with bitterness, but with the clarity of someone who had closed a painful chapter of her life. As days turned into weeks, I immersed myself in my work and the decoration of my new apartment. The creative process was therapeutic, each design choice a step towards rebuilding myself. I was rediscovering the passions and dreams I had before Nathan, reconnecting with the essence of who I was. One evening, as I sat on my new balcony, a sense of peace washed over me. The city lights twinkled in the distance, each a reminder of the possibilities that lay ahead. I had endured the storm and emerged stronger. In that moment, I knew that the tide had truly turned. I had moved beyond the pain and betrayal. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. In the months that followed, my life took on a rhythm of renewal and self-discovery. My new apartment became a sanctuary, a place where I could be myself without the shadows of a strained marriage. Meanwhile, the repercussions of my decisive actions were unfolding in ways I hadn't anticipated. Word reached me about Nathan and Bella's struggles. The luxurious life Bella had flaunted on social media had diminished significantly, her posts now a stark contrast to the opulence she once displayed. Nathan, on the other hand, seemed lost, his professional life suffering as he grappled with the personal upheaval. One day, as I sat in a cafe sketching designs for a client, I noticed Nathan walk in. He looked different. There was a weariness about him that I hadn't seen before. Our eyes met briefly, and in that fleeting moment, I saw a mix of regret and resignation. He approached me hesitantly. "Eliza, can we talk?" he asked, his voice lacking its former confidence. I nodded, setting aside my sketches. The conversation that ensued was a surreal experience. Nathan spoke of his regrets, of how he had underestimated me and the life we had. He talked about Bella, about how their relationship was nothing more than a facade, a superficial connection that paled in comparison to what we had. I listened, not with satisfaction but with a sense of closure. "Nathan, we both made choices," I said calmly. "You chose a path, and I chose mine. We can't undo the past, but we can learn from it." As Nathan left the cafe, I felt a final thread of our connection sever. It was an unspoken goodbye, a mutual acknowledgement that our chapter was closed. Emboldened by these events, I dove deeper into my career. My designs gained recognition, leading to more prestigious projects. I also reconnected with old friends and even made new ones. Life was busy, but it was a fulfilling kind of busy, one that brought a sense of accomplishment and joy. One evening, as I reviewed my latest project, I received a call from an old colleague, Mark, who had always been a supportive friend. He proposed a collaboration on an exciting new venture. It was an opportunity to stretch my creative muscles and be part of something innovative and challenging. As I mulled over Mark's proposal, I realized how far I had come. The pain and betrayal that once defined my days were now just faint echoes of a past life. In their place was a strong, confident woman who had taken charge of her destiny. I picked up the phone and called Mark. "I'm in," I said, a smile spreading across my face. It was time for new adventures, new challenges, and new stories to tell. Months had passed since my last encounter with Nathan, and my life had taken on a new, vibrant rhythm. The collaboration with Mark had been a resounding success, bringing both of us acclaim in the design world. My days were filled with creativity and purpose, a far cry from the uncertainty that had once clouded my life. But it wasn't just my professional life that had flourished. I had found a sense of peace and contentment in my personal life as well. My apartment was now a reflection of my journey. Every piece of furniture, every artwork told a story of resilience and rebirth. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, a soft breeze playing with my hair, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The journey from the turmoil of my marriage to where I was now had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had also been a journey of immense growth and self-discovery. I thought about Nathan and how our paths had diverged. I harbored no ill will towards him. Instead, I hoped he found the growth and peace he needed. As for Bella, I wished her well in her own journey of self-discovery. The phone rang, pulling me out of my reverie. It was an invitation to speak at a renowned design conference, an opportunity to share my journey and insights with others. I accepted with a sense of excitement and humility. As I prepared for the conference, I realized that my story was not just about the end of a marriage or the pain of betrayal. It was about the power of resilience, the beauty of starting over, and the importance of staying true to oneself. Standing on the stage at the conference, I looked out at the audience, a sea of eager faces, each on their own journey. I began to speak, not just as a designer, but as a woman who had navigated the depths of despair and emerged stronger. I stand before you today not just as a designer, but as someone who believes in the power of transformation, I began. Every space I design tells a story, and so does every moment of our lives. We have the power to redefine our spaces, our stories, and ultimately ourselves. The applause at the end of my talk was not just an acknowledgement of my words, but a celebration of the journey I had shared. As I left the stage, a sense of fulfillment washed over me. I had not only rebuilt my life, but had also found a way to inspire others with my story. Life, much like design, is about creating beauty from chaos, order from disorder, and joy from pain. And as I continued on my path, I carried with me the lessons of my past, a past that had shaped me but no longer defined me.
"I want you to marry me," Sean said to me with a determined look. We were at a fancier restaurant than usual. And although I had suspected something like this might happen, the moment of the proposal, one every girl dreams of, made my heart and knees tremble. He skipped all the preliminaries and went straight to proposing. It must have been quite a high for Sean, too. Thinking about that, I began to calm down, and I could feel my trembling subside. I have something I really want to do right now. It's my dream, my goal. Can I continue with it even after we're married? I asked. Sean nodded and smiled. Of course. I am Rebecca. I have a dream. I want to make my passion my life's work. And I'm taking steps towards making it a reality right now. I've always been good with my hands, enjoying detailed work and having a strong interest in crafting. I've made plastic models and even carved woodblock prints and Buddha statues with chisels. I have the patience needed for crafting. As I mastered various tools and expanded the types of things I could create, I started to wonder what it was that I truly wanted to create. Instead of dabbling in everything, I felt a desire to focus and fully utilize my abilities. During this time of searching, when I was a freshman in high school, my father suggested I attend a jewelry making class. My father runs an import company and knew a handmade jewelry designer through work. The recommended class was run by her, and she also taught there. As a girl, I had an interest in jewelry, but I had only ever thought of it as something to buy, not to make. The concept of handmade jewelry opened up a new path for me. You come highly recommended by your father. I hear you're very skillful with your hands. We welcome such talents, said Gina, the teacher, who is reputed to be a charismatic figure in the jewelry world. Her delicate, precise, yet bold designs are unique and have captivated many women. On the first day, after learning about the tools needed for handmade jewelry, such as pliers, nippers, cutters, and tweezers, I got to try them out. I was already familiar with these tools, but the ways they were used in jewelry making were somewhat unique and fascinating. You have a good touch. It's clear you're used to these tools. You'll be able to move up quickly, the teacher praised me. I was pleased, although I felt a bit puzzled because it didn't seem like such a big deal to me. If you're willing, I'll teach you everything I know. What do you think? Want to give it a try? Yes, please. I learned something new today. I want to know more. I had a vague sense, but I was aware that jewelry making was what I had been looking for. What I should be doing and focusing on. It was a strange feeling, as if I had finally found what I had always been searching for. And realizing this is it during my first experience was exhilarating. Despite it being our first meeting, I instinctively knew that Gina was the person who would lead me to the pinnacle of this world. To describe this feeling as merely strange seemed far too simple. I had stuck my foot in the door out of a desire to learn something new. But I quickly became enthralled with jewelry making. Once my engine started, I was hooked, and attending classes became incredibly enjoyable. As I learned from Gina and began to research on my own, I eventually came to understand the allure of jewelry and wanted to create something that would maximize its potential. The joy of having found something I truly wanted to engage in enveloped me. While I continued to create, my interest also turned toward accessory design, prompting me to enroll in the design course led by Gina. I realized anew that creation begins from nothing, and design is that critical first step. Design demands more than manual dexterity, it requires strong drawing skills, a sense of aesthetics, and creativity, forces I had not fully utilized until now. Rebecca, you have a knack for this. Combining craftsmanship with design talent is rare. I was genuinely happy to hear her words because by that time, I was already convinced that this was my true calling. There are people in the world who are incompatible with oneself. And during the design course, I encountered such a person. Her name is Mandy. We were the same age, but for some reason, she took an unexplained dislike to me. Just because the teacher pays a bit more attention to you, don't get all cocky. You don't have any real talent. You're such an eyesore. Mandy seen she didn't like that Gina had highly rated me. Mandy was enrolled in the designer course, aiming to become a designer herself. But she seemed jealous and competitive. Because I had appeared later and demonstrated greater ability. If she had time to worry about others, she should focus on improving herself. I couldn't understand her attitude of treating me as an enemy without making any effort herself. And it was quite a nuisance. Although meeting Mandy was distressing, I never thought about quitting the class. For me, thinking about and creating jewelry had become incredibly important. Almost inseparable from my life. The teachings I received from Gina were a significant stimulus and absolutely crucial. And I could not consider distancing myself from these benefits. Despite the problem of Mandy, the time I spent fully learning about my passion flew by quickly. As the time to graduate from high school drew near, I began to contemplate my future path. I thought about what I was seriously committed to, and the things I needed to realize the world as I envisioned it. I found myself wanting to delve deeper into the study of design and the materials of jewelry and precious metals. I believed that skill is supported by knowledge, and knowledge in turn supports skill. This was the philosophy I held. Knowledge does not betray you. Now is the time to expand your capacity. Gina supported my thoughts. I set my sights on a university with an art department and dedicated myself to studying for the entrance exams, but Mandy mocked me. I'll move straight into a designer career after graduating high school. I don't have time for detours. You might as well get lost in a detour or a maze. Mandy planned to join Gina's design office immediately after graduation. If taken at face value, Her plan might seem commendable, but I could clearly see Mandy's underlying motives and true feelings. She found studying bothersome. She didn't want to spend 4 more years studying. If she had the time, she wanted to start working in the field immediately to enhance her skills. But had Mandy really made an effort to improve herself during the nearly 3 years we had been together? I knew her thinking all too well. Mandy did not excel at learning. She wanted to be the best, but did not show the effort required for it. Mandy, you always act so cool. Do you want to go to college to make a name for yourself? Don't you want to get into design right away? Knowledge never betrays you. I thought about my future and decided I need to gain more knowledge now, I replied. As Mandy laughed and waved her hands dismissively while walking away. A surge of confidence, or rather, conceit, seemed to emanate from her. Suddenly, I remembered Gina's words about her. Mandy would grow so much more if she embraced humility and effort. Having wanted to gain specialized knowledge about design and precious materials, my wish came true when I enrolled in the art department at a comprehensive university. I couldn't wait to spend the next 4 years immersed in learning about design. A jewelry designer needs knowledge of precious metals, drafting skills, and a sense of design. For custom orders, capturing the client's image and sketching it out, as well as insight and the ability to propose designs, are essential. The entire process requires meticulousness to achieve a high degree of completion. I was determined to master these during my 4 years at university and stand on the starting line as a designer. My college life, eagerly anticipated, turned out to be as fruitful as I had hoped. Not only because of the learning but also because I made new friends. There were students from various faculties at my university, and interaction was lively. While most students met through club activities, my case was a bit different. I've always been interested in cooking, and while I'm not bragging, I was confident in my ability to cook reasonably well. Wanting to try a part-time job now that I was in college, I saw a flyer for a cooking assistant at the university cafeteria and thought it was perfect for me. Luckily, my required courses were scheduled in the morning 3 times a week, but the rest were in the afternoon, meaning I had mornings free, which was ideal for working at the cafeteria before my afternoon classes. It was as if the job had been tailor-made for me. Of course, I applied immediately and was hired. At first, I was assigned simple tasks, but as my skills became known, I was entrusted with more important tasks. 2 months later, although it was just basic stew, I was entrusted with the main cooking task. It might have been due to a staff shortage, but it ignited my creative soul. And I created a stew with my own unique twist. Ted and Alyssa were the first customers for my stew. This stew is incredibly good. It's not just your average cafeteria level. Encouraged by the praise I overheard, I couldn't help but jump out in front of them, surprised to learn that a fellow student had made the stew. This was the beginning of our connection, and the starting point of our friendship among the 3 of us. It was perhaps a somewhat unusual pattern. We were from different faculties with different future goals. But perhaps it was a shared underlying spirit that fit together like puzzle pieces, forming an indispensable relationship. I absorbed deeper knowledge in lectures and obtained several qualifications said to be advantageous for becoming a jewelry designer. Among them, passing the Level 1 Jewelry Coordinator certification recognized by the American Jewelry Association boosted my confidence. The best part of my campus life was meeting Ted and Alyssa, who would become lifelong friends. I continued my cafeteria job until graduation, And I can't count how many fans of my cooking I made in those 4 years. Before graduation, the operator allowed me to plan a final menu. And my cooking fans lined up daily, achieving a great success. It was a truly rewarding 4 years of university. After graduating, I was set to join Gina's design office. Excited to finally be able to work professionally in design. However, the thought of encountering Mandy there dampened my spirits. So I resolved to interact with her as little as possible. "I've been waiting for you. I'm looking forward to seeing how much you've improved," Gina said, placing her hands on my shoulders. I was assigned to the first design department, where high-end jewelry is designed. And there, unexpectedly, I had an undesired reunion with Mandy. "Why are you in the first department?" "I'm only in the third." "As usual, you're getting special treatment. Besides the first design department, there are the second department, which designs high-class accessories, and the third department, which designs general mass-produced types." Although Mandy and I were in different departments, we were in the same space. I could feel piercing stares on my back while working. And I didn't need to look to know whose they were. There were unfounded bad rumors about me. And I was hindered from obtaining necessary supplies, often causing work disruptions. It was easy to identify the source, but that was of little consolation. On the other hand, my work was going smoothly. And my designs were gaining recognition within the company. I created prototypes myself, and their quality surprised everyone. Each time my evaluation improved, it seemed to irritate Mandy even more, which was a real nuisance. I wished she would direct that energy towards her work. Before I knew it, 3 years had flown by. They say time passes quickly as you grow older. But perhaps it feels even quicker because of the fulfillment of daily life. I was riding the wave of work, with new ideas constantly coming to mind. Recently, personal changes were also occurring. "Rebecca, I've discovered a stylish cafe. Would you like to go?" The source of the change. Sean, a salesperson from a supplier who had been assigned to our company half a year ago, was inviting me out again today. He had started by inviting me to cafe, meals, and movies. And although I was overwhelmed by his approaches, I eventually agreed to go out with him. And before I knew it, we had started something akin to dating. I had never been particularly interested in men, focusing solely on design. But I was drawn to Sean's good conversational skills, gentle manners, and humor. Although I was puzzled by my own feelings, spending time with him felt fulfilling. When Sean unusually invited me to a high-end restaurant, I sensed something was up. As we moved to coffee time after the meal, at the perfect moment, he presented a small box and said, "I want you to marry me." As expected, I thought, but I couldn't remain completely calm. In fact, my knees were trembling. It was the moment of proposal every girl dreams of, and my heart and knees shook. He skipped all the preliminaries and went straight to proposing. Sean must have been quite excited too. Thinking about that, I started to calm down, and I could feel my trembling subside. "I think I want to marry you too, Sean. But there's something I really want to do right now. It's my dream, my goal. Can I continue it even after we're married?" "I understand, it's about design, right? I have no intention of taking that away from you." "Of course, that's fine. I'll support you." The moment Sean answered, a fanfare of marriage confirmation rang in my head. The life milestone of marriage seemed to give me a significant boost. Activated by this, more design ideas surged forth, and I created works that even surprised Gina. I'd like to say it was smooth sailing, but Mandy's hostility towards me doubled. "You're getting married, you uppity woman." I don't know the details because I'm not interested, but it seems Mandy doesn't have a lover. That's probably why she's throwing a hysterical fit out of frustration. It's only going well for you now. You'll fall into hell later. No, I'll make sure of it. To me, Mandy's threatening words sounded like the pitiful flailing of a woman I should just ignore. Sean and I, having chosen an auspicious day, finally started our married life. Of course, it's my first marriage, so I have no one to compare him to. But Sean is an outstanding husband. Just having him by my side fills my heart. This feeling is new to me, and I am genuinely happy and feel blessed. As he promised before our marriage, he shows understanding towards my work, repeatedly offering support and praise. Jewelry and accessories lead people to happiness. The happiness I feel in creating them reflects in my work, producing superior pieces. I wonder how long the honeymoon phase of our newlywed period will last. It varies from person to person, and there's no set moment it ends. But I suspect it lasts at least a year, no matter how brief. 10 months into marriage. The honeymoon period I thought would last forever with Sean gradually began to cloud over. Starting, I think, with his increasingly late returns home. He would blame it on work getting busier or overtime. And his late returns became the norm every working day, leading to more overnights and a growing sense of doubt and unease. When he started going out even on days off, claiming he had to work, I once asked him, "Your job isn't supposed to be so busy that you need to work on weekends, right?" From my mistrust, my tone might have turned a bit sharp. Then he would sarcastically retort, "That's rude, I've gotten busier." Well, not as busy as you. While I often return home late from work myself, Sean is still not back yet. When I enter our dark home, I feel a cold draft hit me. When I noticed the smell of perfume on Sean's suit, I was stunned. Searching his pockets, I found a pair of women's earrings that weren't mine. When I found them, I couldn't stand any longer and sat down on the floor. Even while sensing another woman's presence, I was too scared to confront Sean directly. The instability in my personal life and the turmoil in my heart started affecting my work, causing a slump. "What's wrong? You seem off." This is the time to really push through. Hang in there. I felt sorry toward Gina, who was concerned for me, and tears almost came. Yes, this is a crucial time. For the sake of realizing my dreams, I cannot afford to look down. That night, Sean came home on time unusually, and I had a report for him. "I've decided to quit my job from now on." Before I could finish, Sean raised his voice. "What? You plan to be unemployed? You're joking, right? What will happen if we lose your income?" "No, not unemployed." I tried to continue my report, but Sean interrupted me with a displeased look. "After all this time married, we still don't have kids. You're useless as a wife already, and now you plan to leech off me with no income? Could it be that he's thought of me as a useless wife all this time? That's outrageous." Frustrated, I retorted, "Leeching? Not having a baby is something bestowed, it's not just my fault. You're always home late, we hardly have any time together." But Sean was no longer listening. He dismissively said, "Ah, enough. You're worthless unemployed. It's about time to end being useless." "What do you mean by end?" "Wait, what are you saying?" "Just what I said." "Sign this." Confused, I looked at what Sean handed me. It was a divorce form. As I stared speechlessly at the paper, Sean said with a laugh, "My girlfriend is pregnant. I'm going to be a dad. She's a better woman than you. Earns less than you did, but still more than you, now that you're unemployed. So, you were cheating. And you got her pregnant. That's right, so goodbye. I'll let you keep all the property, so don't even think about asking for compensation." Then, as if he had packed in advance, Sean grabbed 2 bags and left the house. I couldn't keep up with the turn of events and just sat there, staring at the divorce papers on the table. How long had it been? I lost track of time. My phone rang, snapping me back to reality. An unknown number. Normally, I would ignore it, but in my disoriented state, I answered unconsciously. Finally picked up, "Huh? You can't ignore me." It was Mandy. I was so stunned, the shock didn't fully register. "So, you're at rock bottom, huh? Makes sense, since your husband left you. How do you know that?" Why Mandy knew about my situation was beyond me, as my mind couldn't catch up. Mockingly, Mandy continued, "Sean is with me now. He just left you. That's why I told you not to get cocky. Why is Sean with you? Don't you get it? Sean is mine now. You've been dumped. Hurry up and file those divorce papers. We want to get married soon, for the baby's sake." Mandy laughed as she said her piece and hung up. Even with my slow processing, I realized that Sean's other woman was Mandy. With my phone still to my ear, how much time had passed. Slowly, I clawed my way out of the mire of shock, and anger began to rise within me. Divorce? Fine. I couldn't stay married to such a man. I would never forget this. I would make him painfully aware of his own foolishness and guilt. That time would surely come. I had a premonition about it. 2.5 years later, here I am, at the grand opening of a high-end jewelry shop in a new large shopping mall. This is the 3rd store, and the first 2 have gained high popularity among young women, with high expectations for the new outlet. The store was bustling with customers right after opening. I enjoy visiting shops as part of my routine, observing what kind of pieces interest customers and trends in what sells. I also listen to conversations between customers to gather information, which often provides hints for my designs. As I was walking through the store, eyes and ears open, I was suddenly approached. It was Sean, my ex-husband. "Rebecca, what are you doing in a place like this? This is no place for you. Just go home." Seeing his face and hearing his voice for the first time since the day he handed me the divorce papers, the frustration of that day resurfaced. "Why are you even here? This place doesn't suit you. I'm looking for a present for Mandy. I give her gifts for every anniversary. We're doing great." "Oh, really? And you say I don't belong here? What do you mean? Come on, you gave up on being a designer because you had no talent and quit your job, right? Yet here you are, hanging around out of regret? Pathetic." I let out a big sigh and began to correct his misunderstanding. "You know, this is my store?" Sean looked momentarily stunned, but soon his expression turned to one of pity. "You're delusional. If you think you can make up such lies, it's no laughing matter. It sounds like an illness." Just then, an employee approached me. "President, about the display matter." "Oh, I'm sorry, were you busy?" "No, it's okay. We'll talk later." After apologizing to the employee and facing Sean again, he was shaking with astonishment. You're the president. So, this really is your place? The day Sean talked about me leaving the company and initiated the divorce. He didn't let me explain that I was leaving to start my own design studio. With Gina's encouragement, I decided to pursue my dream of independence. As I planned this, not only designing, but also selling the products myself became part of the goal. The opportunity came from my father, who runs an import business, and offered to share his know-how on product sourcing and sales. While my own accessories alone wouldn't have been enough to open a store, combining them with a variety of excellent products sourced both domestically and internationally, we could make it work. Gina was also keen to help, and so the plan kicked off. Furthermore, the arrival of two powerful allies made the founding of my company possible. Those allies were Ted and Alyssa, my close friends since university. Ted, a lawyer specializing in corporate law since graduating from law school, advised on company setup and intellectual property rights. Alyssa, with a background in business administration and rich in management knowledge, drew on her experience to offer operational advice. With their robust support, the company had a smooth start. Additionally, both my father and Gina provided financial support. Especially Gina, who also has a side as an investor. And she opened her class with the intention of leading capable individuals to independence. I was fortunate to meet her standards. I think I was lucky. The first store gained a reputation for the quality of its accessories and, being in a good location, attracted many customers. Social media spread helped too, stabilizing and increasing sales. My designs appealed to many female customers, especially younger ones. And the items sourced internationally were popular across all ages. Before I knew it, the company's retained earnings had grown so much that, after several capital increases, our total assets had reached $10 million. So, I'm doing well as a designer. Maybe my luck turned around after we split up? Realizing the truth, Sean's attitude changed, and he pressed me. $10 million in assets? When did? Wait, that means I'm entitled to a part of that. We need to divide your wealth fairly. Sean had previously said there would be no compensation or division of assets. But when I pressed him on this, he pathetically backtracked. That doesn't count. I didn't know you were going to be wealthy. What is he talking about now? The situation was so absurd that my astonishment quickly gave way to laughter welling up inside me. You don't understand, do you? Asset division is about dividing wealth acquired together when you divorce. Why should I share the wealth I built on my own after our divorce? When I asked this, Sean struggled to respond. That's because it's thanks to our marriage that your luck improved. That's why. He was twisting my words to suit himself. The wealth was created through my design skills. Even if it went to court, do you think you'd have a chance? I don't know about that. Sean still thought he could extract something from me. I needed to cool him down. Let me tell you something decisive then. The statute of limitations for claiming a division of assets is 2 years after divorce. That period has long expired. Even if it hadn't, your foolish demands would not have been recognized. Damn it. Frustrated, Sean was now on the defensive. Well then, I'll also be claiming compensation from you and Mandy. Make sure you pay up. Compensation now? That's not what we agreed on. Besides, who asks for compensation so late? He had no grounds to stand on, having reneged on his own words. Sean was angry but legally. The statute of limitations for filing for compensation was 3 years, so I was safe. Explaining this, Sean pleaded in desperation. "Don't do this. Please, I don't have that kind of money." "Oh, really? But you were here to buy a gift for Mandy today, weren't you? You must be getting squeezed by her, she's so demanding." Caught off guard, Sean stumbled over his words. I added, "I've heard Mandy makes all her men pay. Her relationships are a mess." Gina, too, had been troubled by Mandy's conduct, once remarking, "This isn't a school, so I can't give life guidance, but I can't just ignore it either," while grimacing. Suddenly, I remembered something and said, "You blamed me for not getting pregnant as a reason for our divorce. But wasn't it you who was the issue? What are you suddenly talking about?" "What do you mean?" "Well, it turns out I'm quite fertile. My daughter is almost 2 years old now." Betrayed by Sean and having become wary of men. It was Ted who had supported me both personally and professionally. "I've loved you since college. You had me with your cafeteria stew." Believing in Ted, I entered a relationship with him. Soon after, I became pregnant with his child and we married. With Mandy's hectic love life, you think she's pregnant with your child? Convenient timing. If you were the cause of the infertility, is her child really yours? Only God knows. It's my child, don't joke about that. Defeated in argument, Sean walked away as if sleepwalking. Later, I learned from reports that after confronting Mandy, Sean had a breakdown when he found out my suspicions were true. They broke up not just because of their relationship issues. After making a scene at Gina's office, where Mandy worked, which even involved the police, Gina, fed up with Mandy's behavior, fired her. Furthermore, Gina complained to Sean's company, leading to his dismissal. Now jobless, both were crushed under the weight of the compensation I demanded. Unescapable, thanks to the sharp lawyer Ted. How they would manage their finances was no concern of mine, they'd probably drown in debt. While Ted and Alyssa helped manage the business, I devoted myself to designing. I wanted to create things that would make women happy, adding a bit of sparkle to their lives. As I was planning the 4th store and reviewing properties, my phone rang. "Good work today. Looks like I can come home early. Let's have dinner together." "What's on the menu?" "Stew, your favorite." "Great. Your stew has always been the best since our cafeteria days." I'm rushing home. Now, I'm truly happy and fulfilled. When my daughter gets a little older, I'll teach her my stew recipe.
I'm remarrying a 23-year-old wealthy man's daughter. Get the hell out of here. You on welfare. Just 3 days after we separated, I met Greg. Next to him stood a young, beautiful woman. She entwined her arm with Greg's and seemed wary of me. However, I recognized her. Have we met somewhere before? Or am I mistaken? While Greg hurled harsh words at me, I desperately tried to recall who this woman was. Then it hit me. Could it be? I remembered how I first came to know this woman and her true identity. At the same time, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Hey, what are you laughing at? It's creepy." "Sorry, it's just because this woman is that person. My name is Ashley Morris. I'm 32 and single. I've been working as a nursery school teacher, which has been my dream since I was a student. There are tough aspects like pressure from my boss and dealing with parents. but I'm healed every day by the children's smiles as I work hard. Above all, I've always admired nursery school teachers. I can't quit easily. My workplace might change, but I plan to continue as a nursery teacher until retirement. That's what I thought. However, life doesn't always go as planned. One day, at a mixer invited by a friend, I met a man 3 years my senior, Greg. He seems to be an executive at a well-known company around here. He achieved good results and became an executive in his 20s. I guess that's what they call an elite. However, far from bragging about his career, he was a very humble man. Wow, an executive in your 20s? That's amazing. Not really. There were quite a few others besides me. Still, it's impressive to the outside world. Greg and I happened to sit next to each other, and we hit it off as if we weren't strangers. We exchanged contact information and started meeting. After a few dates, our relationship developed. After 3 years of dating, we got married. Greg was very kind to me even while we were dating. He would plan our dates and give me wonderful gifts, not only on special days. Thank you, Greg. I just want to see Ashley happy. He would come up with such cheesy lines, and I was thrilled. I felt fortunate to have met such a wonderful person. However, at that time, I didn't yet know Greg's true nature. After getting married, my life changed dramatically. It began when Greg told me to quit being a nursery school teacher. Why? I intended to continue working even after getting married. Greg had agreed to that. Please. My mom also said it would be better that way. Your mother has nothing to do with our lives, right? She does, doesn't she? Mom said she would support our lives. Why do you want to work so much? You can live on my income alone. I'm not denying that. Indeed, we could live on Greg's income alone, but I was reluctant to quit being a nursery school teacher. After discussing it, I relented. In fact, we had discussed wanting children in the future, and we concluded that it would be more reassuring to have me at home to start a family. It seems that my mother-in-law had suggested the same, and I reluctantly decided to quit my job. After quitting, at Greg's request, we moved close to his parents' home. According to Greg, it would be easier to receive support if our houses were close. It's at least better than living together. That's what I thought, and I accepted the move. I regretted not discussing our married life while we were dating, but that's a secret. If my mother-in-law had a good personality, I would have gladly accepted it. However, her character was far from good. She looked down on me and scrutinized me with judging eyes. I just couldn't accept that. But once Greg and I started living together, I hoped the chances of meeting my mother-in-law would decrease. That was a big misunderstanding. In fact, since we moved close by, my mother-in-law started coming to our house daily. My father-in-law had already passed away, and perhaps she disliked being alone at home. Excuse me, Ashley. What is this frozen food packaging doing here? Every time she visited, my mother-in-law would thoroughly check every corner of the house, even peeking into the trash can. Hey, not there too. You're not letting my son eat lunches filled with frozen food, are you? I do use some frozen food, but not for everything. As a housewife, shouldn't you be making every lunch from scratch? Are you planning to feed our future children frozen food too? Ah, I can't believe I have such an unimaginable daughter-in-law. I'm sorry. Should a housewife not use frozen food? Certainly, I had chosen the path of a full-time housewife. However, it wasn't something I had desired myself. After my mother-in-law had her say and left our house satisfied. Sigh. All I could do was sigh. Day after day, my mother-in-law would come to the house, complain, and leave. There were even times when she came while I was out and told me off. Where are you? I came all this way, so hurry up and let me in the houses. She seemed to enjoy tormenting me and used it as a way to relieve her stress. Although I had refused before, getting told off every time was exhausting. Eventually, I became cautious even when going to the nearby convenience store. However, my mother-in-law continuously repeated one particular phrase. When will you have children? She pressured me every time we met. We still can't have them. What? Are you kidding me? You're infertile, aren't you? Such tactless remarks were typical of her. As far as my mother-in-law was concerned, the inability to have children was all my fault. Greg was definitely not to blame. However, Greg himself was kind to me. He seemed to think that pregnancy was something we should work on as a couple, and he often cared about my health. Don't rush with the kids. Sure, I want to give Mom a grandchild, but you're more important to me. Right? Right. Thank you. I thought that if we worked together as a couple, we would eventually be blessed with children. However, my hopes never reached fruition. 2 years later, we still hadn't had any children. At that time, my mother-in-law seemed to have given up on having grandchildren and stopped visiting our houses. At the same time, Greg's attitude towards me worsened, and he began to verbally abuse me casually. Perhaps it was the stress of not being able to have children, or maybe he just grew to dislike me. The more I thought about it, the darker my thoughts became. But Greg didn't seem to care about how I felt. Hey, the food. Why isn't it ready yet? Ah, sorry. It'll be ready soon. Ugh, really useless. Can't even cook, can't clean, can't get pregnant. Mom was disgusted. Why did I even marry someone like you? Sorry. I no longer had the energy to fight back, and I just kept apologizing to Greg. Seeing me like this, Greg became even more abusive. He would complain about the food being bad, the cleaning not being thorough. I could even get yelled at for a single strand of hair being out of place. And after hurling abuse at me, he would always say, "That's why you can't get pregnant." I was careful about my diet and health management. I took my temperature, managed my menstrual cycle, and was more cautious than when we first got married. But still, I didn't become pregnant. Initially, it was Greg who refused. I understood he was busy or tired from work. But if he was going to complain about not having children, shouldn't he be cooperating? If you're going to say that, then help out. This isn't something I can handle alone. Ugh, shut up. Haven't I told you I'm tired? No matter how I tried to reason with him, Greg would only say he was tired and showed no signs of willingness to cooperate. If Greg wasn't going to help, there was nothing I could do. Whenever I had a moment to myself, I would wonder how things had come to this. Was this the married life I had envisioned? I vaguely thought that our relationship which had completely cooled, might never return to how it was before. 6 months later, our relationship had cooled even further. Eventually, Greg stopped coming home altogether. He claimed it was due to sudden overtime or drinking parties. He said he had work on holidays too, so he spent very little time at home. I figured he must have given up on me and was probably cheating. If only he would just say he wanted a divorce. In the end, I had no choice but to live a lonely life at home by myself. Greg occasionally came home, but he continued to spew verbal abuse at me. "Why do you always look so miserable? It's disgusting. Sorry." Where had the Greg I married gone? The Greg from those days wasn't someone who would call people disgusting. All I could do was apologize, trying not to upset him further. However, one day, after finishing shopping for dinner and returning home, Greg was there unusually. "Oh, what's up?" "Ah, Ashley. Finally back, huh?" Greg spoke cheerfully. What was he planning? I braced myself and waited for his words when he suddenly handed me a piece of paper. It was a divorce paper. Huh, a divorce. "Yeah, I don't need you anymore. There's no point in us being married. Go ahead, become homeless, or get on welfare." So, that's how it is. Alongside the sadness of being clearly told I was no longer needed, I felt a sense of relief that I could finally escape this life. I understand. I accepted the divorce without hesitation. Perhaps because I accepted it so quickly, Greg seemed slightly surprised. I signed the divorce papers and handed them to Greg. At that moment, I felt like I was released from everything and let out a big sigh. Greg told me to get out by the next day, so I went back to my room and packed the essentials. The next day, while Greg was at work, I left the houses and headed to my parents' houses. I had contacted my parents, but they seemed worried now that I was actually coming home. "You can stay at home as long as you need. There's no rush." Encouraged by my mother's words, I decided to face tomorrow with renewed effort. 3 days after the divorce, my heart was still healing, but I knew I had to move forward. I needed to find a job, so I looked through magazines and online for job listings. Perhaps due to labor shortages, there were many openings for nursery school teachers. Maybe I should become a nursery teacher again. I saved a few listings that caught my interest. Looking at the clock, it was past 4 p.m. I had been looking at listings for an hour. I decided to go outside for a change of pace. I didn't have any particular errand, I just wanted to take a walk. I reminisced about walking this path to school or working as a part-timer at this grocery store. However, just as I was about to head home after wandering around for about 30 minutes, I saw a familiar figure. "Greg?" "What?" "Ashley." In front of me stood Greg, and next to him was an unfamiliar woman, much younger and more beautiful than either Greg or me. The woman intertwined her arm with Greg's and looked at me warily. "Why are you here?" "That's my line. Why are you here?" "Shut up. It's none of your business." Greg did not want to answer my question. "Hey, Greg, who is this woman?" "Oh, she's my ex-wife." "Don't worry about her, Vanessa." "Ex-wife?" The woman, referred to as Vanessa, was acting flirtatiously, though it only made her seem more like a bimbo. Yet, I felt another emotion upon seeing Vanessa. She seemed familiar. Had we ever met before? Who is she? My current wife. Mom introduced us. What? Wife? That's right. Just 3 days after our divorce, and he's already remarried. My mind went blank. To add insult to injury, Vanessa revealed a shocking fact. We're going to have a baby in a few months. A baby? Considering the size of Vanessa's belly, she seemed to have been pregnant for more than half a year. That time frame overlaps with when Greg stopped coming home. Had they been connected since then? Anyway, Greg looked at Vanessa's face and once again forced reality upon me. I'm remarrying a 23-year-old wealthy man's daughter. Get the hell out of here, you on welfare. Greg said this and burst into a dirty laugh, which Vanessa joined with a high-pitched giggle. That's not. I'm not on welfare. Shut up. Stop pretending. Then Greg and Vanessa burst into laughter again. I felt miserable and was about to cry. However, as I glanced at Vanessa's face, I realized something. The déjà vu I had been feeling since earlier, and the fact that Vanessa was a wealthy man's daughter. Everything connected. At the same time, my tears receded and laughter welled up inside me. Ha ha. My sudden laughter made them step back a bit. Why is she laughing? Gross. Can't handle this. Shall we go? Disgusted by me, the two of them quickly left the scene. The reason I laughed at Vanessa was that I knew her real identity. Indeed, Vanessa is a wealthy man's daughter. However, it's not a successful wealth. In fact, her parents' company, which they managed, was on the brink of bankruptcy. A little while ago, when I was reading job sites and magazines, Vanessa was introduced as a wealthy man's daughter with a photo. It's rare for a wealthy family to introduce their daughter like that, which is why it's stuck in my memory. When I later researched the company owned by the wealthy family, various bulletin boards and review sites mentioned it was close to bankruptcy, and indeed, it seemed to be in quite precarious management. Bankruptcy seemed imminent. It was that much of a troubled company. Maybe this could work. Seeing Greg happy, and the fact that his mother introduced Vanessa. Watching all this, something inside me crumbled. I was determined to teach them a lesson with my own hands. They might be happy now, but I'll definitely plunge them into the depths of misery. The first thing I did to bring them down was to offer them a direct apology. A few days after meeting Greg again, I contacted Greg, apologized for laughing, and expressed my desire to give them a baby shower gift. Initially cautious, Greg accepted my request once he saw I was remorseful. However, this was merely a part of my strategy. I wanted to claim damages from Greg and Vanessa through a lawyer, but I had no solid evidence. So, pretending to be remorseful, I called them out to let them spill everything about how they met and the baby, recording everything to submit to the lawyer. A week later, I was at a cafe near my parents' home. Greg and Vanessa arrived about 10 minutes past our meeting time. Sorry. They sat down in front of me without any remorse, still arm in arm, flaunting their affection. Sorry for calling you out suddenly. I was thinking about how rude I was last time we met. I wanted to apologize. Also, isn't your child due soon? I was wondering if I could give you a baby shower gift. Really? Wow, you're so thoughtful. Greg and Vanessa were elated, unaware of everything. By the way, you met through your mother, right? I'd love to hear more about it. As I said this, I discreetly started recording with my smartphone. You want to know? Can't help it then. Greg began talking eagerly, with Vanessa looking at him adoringly. To anyone else, it might seem like a sweet couple's story, but it was far from that. That time was really tough, huh? Yeah, but I'm happy to be with Greg now. Vanessa clung to Greg, who relaxed his expression. Honestly, it was nauseating seeing Greg dote on a younger woman. The two of them fell right into my trap, telling each other how much they loved one another. Of course, I was recording everything. This should definitely serve as solid evidence. Isn't it great to remarry someone younger? Of course, I'm truly happy every day. Right, Vanessa? Yeah, so happy. Their lovey-dovey talk lasted over an hour. It was hard to keep smiling and nodding, but the more comfortably they talked, the more advantageous it was for me. 3 hours later, we all went our separate ways. I went home and replayed the recordings. Everything was recorded clearly. I then contacted the law firm I had in mind. After a day's activities, I flopped onto my bed. Greg and Vanessa's happy faces wouldn't leave my mind. It seemed he was happier with her than when he was with me. When did he start to dislike me? Sigh. Before our marriage, I only saw the good sides of Greg, and now I was painfully aware of it. 2 weeks later, I called them to a nearby station, saying I wanted them to see the actual baby gift. They arrived about 10 minutes late, arm in arm as usual. Putting so much effort into seeing the actual gift, huh? You seemed so sad before, but you're actually celebrating for us. Yeah, so happy. Happy indeed. They were as close as ever, but their happiness would only last until this moment. Shall we go? I led them to a taxi. Our destination was the law office. Unaware of anything, they continued to flirt in the taxi, impressively unconcerned about public eyes. A few minutes later, the taxi arrived at the law office. The blissfully unaware couple followed me without any suspicion, but Greg realized something was amiss as we entered. Hey, what's this place? He shouted, but it was too late. Guided by the receptionist, they were led into a conference room. Were you tricking us? What do you mean? The two of them were yelling loudly, but the lawyer present calmed them down. Did you really think I was going to give you a baby shower gift? Thanks for coming all this way. What? As the two flustered people sat down, the lawyer explained what was happening and why I had taken such actions. Really, you're the worst. What's with this person? We're already divorced, right? We don't have anything to do with compensation. I am going to sue you for the abuses of me, especially under your cheating. You can still claim such compensation after a divorce, you know? All the lovey-dovey talk you happily shared at the cafe has been recorded and submitted, and the fact of your affair hasn't changed. Greg sighed deeply and leaned back in his chair, but he sat up quickly when the lawyer mentioned the amount of compensation being demanded. $15,000? That's impossible. I can't pay that either. What? Can't pay? Why don't you ask her parents? Vanessa made a displeased face at my words. I pressed further, knowing her situation. Oh, but that might be difficult. Her parents' company is about to go bankrupt, isn't it? So no funds, huh? Bankrupt? What do you mean? The company was doing well. Greg, who hadn't been informed, widened his eyes and looked at Vanessa. Realizing she couldn't escape the truth any longer, Vanessa suddenly changed her demeanor and began to talk. Ah, so it's all come out. Then no need to hide it. Yes, my parents' company is on the brink of bankruptcy. Ever since I met this old man, the business has been failing. So I thought I'd milk him for all he's worth and then leave. I never expected to get pregnant. You, calling me an old man. What? You just realized? I never wanted to marry someone like you in the first place. But since I got pregnant, I had no choice. Really, you're the worst. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce as soon as possible. With that, Vanessa burst into high laughter. She seemed like a completely different person. Naturally, Greg was shocked by Vanessa's demeanor. So you've been thinking that about me. I'm tired of acting. Now that it's come to this, I'm leaving you. I can't stand living with an old man like you. Vanessa, the couple, who had seemed so happy up until a moment ago, broke down so easily. While I hadn't known exactly how Vanessa felt about Greg, since I orchestrated this meeting, I was satisfied with the outcome. Eventually, Greg agreed to pay the compensation in a lump sum. I worried Greg might try to escape his obligations as his payment was delayed. However, a month later, that worry was resolved when Greg called me. As soon as I answered, he pleaded, "Help me." It turned out that his affair had been discovered at his company, making it difficult for him to stay, and he chose to resign. He had spent most of his savings on Vanessa, and now, broke and divorced, he had no one to turn to. Hey, can we get back together? I don't have money for the compensation. Vanessa left me for another man, and I heard her company went bankrupt. I don't know what to do. Despite his almost tearful call, I had no intention of getting back together. Get back together? Don't make me laugh. Your problems with that woman running away or not having money are none of my concern. If you hadn't done anything strange, none of this would have happened. Just take responsibility. After I sharply responded, Greg hung up without another word. The next day, whether he borrowed money or not, the full amount I demanded was transferred into my account. I didn't hear from Greg again after that. I'm now living at home and have started working as a nursery school teacher again. Indeed, the smiles of the children are bright. The work environment is better than before, and I enjoy my job every day. Getting divorced from Greg was the right decision. I have no plans to marry again anytime soon. Just like I thought years ago, I hope to continue being a nursery teacher until retirement, taking care of my health and living well.